The quantum mapping vessel Precision Horizon drifted silently through the outer rim of the Orion sector, its crystalline sensor arrays probing the darkness with methodical efficiency. Chief researcher Zix9 had spent 273 standard cycles mapping unremarkable star systems, and this particular solar system seemed destined to join the countless others. Forgettable and insignificant, Earth appeared as nothing more than a blue-green dot on the holographic projection. Barely a footnote in the Koran Collective's expansive galactic database. Preliminary scan complete, chirped the ship's analytical interface. Planet designated Sol 3. Technological index. Pre-interstellar. Biological complexity. Moderate. Threat potential. Negligible. Zix9's multiple optical receptors flickered with the barest hint of disinterest. Another primitive world, another meaningless data point in the vast cosmic tapestry. The Koran had long since mastered the art of technological supremacy. Their civilization had evolved beyond physical form, existing as pure energy consciousness, linked through quantum networks that spanned entire galactic clusters. What could possibly be interesting about a small planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star? The first anomaly appeared so subtly that even the most advanced sensors nearly missed it. A transmission. Not the random electromagnetic noise typical of developing civilizations, but something else. Structured, complex, layered with multiple levels of encryption that should have been impossible for a species barely capable of launching crude metal containers into low planetary orbit. Replay, Zix9 commanded. The transmission resolved itself, not as a simple communication, but as a sophisticated data packet. It contained what appeared to be multiple simultaneous communications, technical specifications, artistic expressions, mathematical theorems, and something the Koran translation matrix struggled to interpret. Humor, embedded within a technical schematic for what seemed to be a propulsion system, was a series of visual jokes. Diagrams that bent the rules of technical illustration, mathematical equations with playful annotations, engineering notes that contained puns and cultural references. The Koran had encountered thousands of developing civilizations. None had ever communicated like this. Recalibrate analysis protocols. Zix9 instructed the ship's intelligence. There's something unusual about this transmission. The transmission itself was a fragment of something larger, a blueprint for a spacecraft design that defied conventional engineering principles. Multiple redundant systems interconnected in ways that made no logical sense, yet each seemingly illogical connection appeared to serve a purpose beyond immediate understanding. Most intriguing was a section that seemed to bridge technological specification with what could only be described as emotional architecture. Systems that didn't just perform functions, but anticipated potential failures with an almost living intelligence. Anomaly confirmed, the ship's interface reported. Transmission contains multiple layers of communication: technical, cultural, psychological. Zix9 felt something rare for a Koran researcher: genuine curiosity. This wasn't just another primitive civilization. This was something else entirely. A species that didn't just build technology, but seemed to collaborate with it. A civilization that turned engineering into an art form, that saw technological development as a creative expression rather than a mere functional necessity. The blue-green planet continued its silent rotation, utterly unaware that it had just captured the full attention of one of the most advanced research vessels in the known galaxy. Something was different about this world. Something extraordinary was brewing on that small, seemingly insignificant planet called Earth. The first wave of the Koran invasion was supposed to be a formality. Invasion Commander Vex Prime watched the holographic battlefield projection with clinical detachment. 50,000 combat drones would neutralize Earth's defensive capabilities in precisely 97 standard minutes. Historical data from similar planetary conquests suggested minimal resistance. Their quantum-synchronized attack matrix was flawless. Simultaneous strikes would disable communication networks, critical infrastructure, and military installations across the planet's major continents. The humans would be overwhelmed before they could even comprehend the scale of the assault. What the Koran didn't anticipate was the chaos that erupted the moment their first wave entered Earth's atmosphere. The initial drone squadrons encountered something impossible, not advanced defenses, not technological miracles, but something far more dangerous: human unpredictability. In New York, a group of hackers in a basement laboratory intercepted the first wave of quantum communication signals. Instead of panicking, they began to analyze, to probe, to understand. Within minutes, they had developed a preliminary counter-algorithm that disrupted the drone's synchronized attack matrix. In Tokyo, a retired mechanical engineer watching the initial invasion saw something no military simulation could have predicted. She quickly jury-rigged a localized electromagnetic pulse, using parts from her grandson's defunct gaming console, a microwave oven, and her electric bicycle's battery system. The pulse wasn't sophisticated. It wasn't even particularly scientific. But it worked. 3 drone squadrons simply dropped from the sky, their quantum circuits scrambled by the most improbable defense mechanism imaginable. Military installations responded with a coordination that defied the Koran's predictive models. Instead of centralized command structures, human defenders operated in decentralized networks. When one communication channel was destroyed, 3 more emerged. When a military base was compromised, civilian networks instantaneously transformed into resistance cells. Invasion Commander Vex Prime's first indication that something was wrong came when the battlefield projection began to glitch. Quantum-linked systems didn't glitch. They weren't supposed to glitch. Yet here was irrefutable evidence that the invasion was not proceeding according to protocol. Recalibrating attack matrix, the ship's tactical interface reported. But there was a new tone in its communication, something that, in a biological organism, might have been described as uncertainty. In Sao Paulo, a group of university students transformed a local research facility into an impromptu defense center. They weren't soldiers. They were engineers, programmers, scientists who saw the invasion not as a catastrophe, but as the ultimate problem-solving challenge. Their first act was to broadcast a planet-wide communication, not a message of fear, not a call to traditional arms, but a collaborative problem-solving network that invited every human with a skill, from network engineers to automotive mechanics, to contribute to Earth's defense. The Koran had prepared for military resistance. They had prepared for technological counterattacks. They had not prepared for a species that treated an alien invasion like a global hackathon. Invasion Commander Vex Prime watched in growing incomprehension as the neat mathematical projection of conquest dissolved into something wild, organic, and fundamentally unpredictable. Humanity was not just fighting back. They were reimagining the very concept of warfare. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's laboratory looked like a cross between a war room and a mad scientist's workshop. Scattered across massive workbenches were pieces of fallen Koran combat drones, alien communication arrays, and what could only be described as the most eclectic collection of technological spare parts ever assembled. "We're not just reverse engineering," she muttered to her team of international researchers. "We're having a conversation with technology itself." The captured alien technology presented a puzzle unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Quantum-entangled circuits, adaptive neural networks that seemed to think faster than biological brains, energy manipulation techniques that defied known physics. To most, it would have been incomprehensible. To Elena and her team, it was the ultimate challenge. Their first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Maria Chen, a 24-year-old quantum computing specialist, noticed something peculiar in the drone's communication matrices. The alien technology didn't just process information, it anticipated it. Each circuit was a living, breathing ecosystem of predictive algorithms that could modify themselves in microseconds. "It's not a computer," Maria explained during an emergency global conference. "It's more like a biological organism. These systems don't just calculate. They learn. They adapt." The international research team worked in shifts that bordered on inhuman. Engineers from Tokyo worked alongside programmers from Cape Town, mathematicians from Moscow collaborated with neural network specialists from Sao Paulo. The invasion had transformed the world's scientific community into a single, hyper-focused organism. Their first practical adaptation came from an unlikely combination. Dr. Rodriguez discovered that by integrating fragments of the alien quantum circuits with human neural network algorithms and introducing an unpredictability factor inspired by chaos theory, they could create a defensive system that the Koran couldn't anticipate. The prototype looked nothing like a traditional weapon system. It was a network, a living tapestry of interconnected intelligence that could reshape itself faster than the alien technology could analyze it. "We're not building a weapon," Elena told her team. "We're building an immune system for our entire planet." The military was skeptical. Traditional defense strategists saw the complex, almost organic system as too unpredictable. But the first field tests changed everything. When the next wave of Koran drones approached, the defensive system didn't just intercept them. It communicated with them. It learned from them. Each incoming drone became a source of new information, its own technology slowly repurposed and integrated into Earth's growing defensive network. What the Koran had intended as a tool of conquest became humanity's greatest learning opportunity. "They came to destroy us," Maria said during a late-night strategy session, her eyes reflecting the holographic displays of captured alien technology. "Instead, they've given us the keys to our own technological evolution." The adaptation wasn't just technological, it was philosophical. Humanity was learning to see technology not as a tool to be used, but as a living, breathing partner in survival. Commander Vex Prime, analyzing the initial reports from the second invasion wave, found something impossible in their quantum data streams. The humans weren't just defending. They were transforming. And nobody, not the Koran, not any civilization in the known universe, was prepared for what would come next. The Koran called it the Psychological Disruption Protocol. What humans called it was far simpler: mind games. Commander Jack Harrison stood in the Global Communications Center, a facility that looked more like a cross between a military command post and a cutting-edge media studio. Around him, a team of psychologists, linguists, hackers, and former advertising executives worked in perfect synchronization. Their weapon wasn't a missile. It wasn't a quantum disruption device. It was information, crafted, weaponized, and deployed with surgical precision. The first transmission went out simultaneously across every communication channel the Koran had established. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a plea for mercy. It was something far more dangerous: humor. Embedded in the transmission were multiple layers of communication. Technical data intertwined with internet memes, complex mathematical equations sitting alongside pop culture references, serious military intelligence, mixed with absurdist comedy sketches. Invasion Commander Vex Prime's first indication that something was wrong came when the quantum communication matrices began to malfunction wasn't the right word. They began to glitch in ways that defied logical explanation. The human transmissions weren't just messages. They were psychological provocations designed to exploit the fundamental weakness in the Koran's hyper-logical neural network. In Tokyo, a team of linguists and memetic warfare specialists created communication packets that were linguistic puzzles. Each message was a multi-layered challenge that required not just computational processing, but genuine creative interpretation. The Koran systems were designed to process information, not to understand context, irony, or intentional miscommunication. A transmission might contain precise coordinates of a military installation, a joke about the installation's cafeteria menu, an obscure mathematical theorem, a reference to a 20-year-old television show, actual tactical information hidden in the white spaces between words. The Koran's computational systems began to slow down, not because of technical interference, but because they were trying to process information that fundamentally challenged their understanding of communication. We're not fighting their technology. Dr. Elena Rodriguez explained during a classified briefing. We're fighting their perception of reality. In Sao Paulo, a group of neurolinguists developed communication algorithms designed to exploit the quantum-linked neural networks of the Koran. Each message was a Trojan horse, seemingly straightforward, but containing layers of psychological complexity that would take massive computational power to unravel. The most brilliant stroke came from an unexpected source. A team of online gamers and internet trolls began flooding Koran communication channels with the most elaborate, complex, and utterly nonsensical information streams imaginable. Memes that required understanding of multiple cultural contexts, jokes that only made sense if you understood 3 different languages simultaneously, mathematical proofs that were also love poems, technical specifications written as epic rap battles. Invasion Commander Vex Prime watched in growing incomprehension as their perfectly calculated invasion dissolved into computational chaos. Humanity wasn't just fighting back. They were rewriting the very rules of conflict. The Koran had prepared for technological resistance. They had prepared for military strategy. They had not prepared for a species that could turn communication itself into a weapon of mass disruption. The United Nations emergency session looked nothing like any diplomatic gathering in human history. Delegates weren't sitting in carefully arranged seats. They were networked into a global holographic conference, representatives from every corner of the planet appearing as near-transparent projections in a vast, interconnected space. Military leaders stood shoulder to shoulder with scientists. Economists worked alongside indigenous tribal leaders. Tech innovators collaborated with agricultural experts. The alien invasion had done what centuries of diplomacy could not. It had made humanity truly united. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of the holographic chamber, her presentation a living, breathing testament to human potential. Behind her, interactive displays showed real-time data from every continent, resources, defensive capabilities, technological innovations. "We are not just defending a planet," she announced, her voice resonating through multiple languages simultaneously. "We are redefining what it means to be a species." The United Earth Defense Command, UEDC, was more than a military organization. It was a radical reimagining of global cooperation. Every nation contributed its unique strengths. China's quantum computing networks, India's adaptive agricultural technologies, Brazil's biomimetic engineering, the United States' advanced aerospace capabilities, Russia's extreme environment survival technologies, African nations' distributed communication networks. No single country was trying to be the hero. They were solving the problem together. In the Arctic research stations, engineers worked on quantum disruption technologies that could neutralize alien communication matrices. In the depths of the Amazon, indigenous communities shared survival strategies that defied traditional military thinking. Silicon Valley startups collaborated with Japanese robotics experts. European renewable energy specialists worked alongside Middle Eastern solar technology innovators. The economic transformation was equally profound. Global markets, once driven by competition, now operated on a collaborative model. Resources were redistributed with unprecedented efficiency. Military budgets were transformed into research and development funds. Every technological breakthrough was immediately shared across the global network. "We've been given an opportunity," United Nations Secretary-General Amara Diallo told the assembled representatives, "not just to survive, but to evolve." The UEDC's strategy was brilliantly simple and incredibly complex. Instead of a centralized command structure, they created a distributed, adaptive network. Each region developed its own defensive and offensive capabilities, but all were interconnected through a quantum communication matrix that could reshape itself faster than the Koran could analyze. Military strategy meetings looked more like improvised problem-solving workshops. Traditional hierarchies dissolved. A young programmer from Kenya could find herself leading a critical strategy session. An indigenous environmental scientist from the Amazon could provide insights that completely reshaped the global defense protocol. Invasion Commander Vex Prime's intelligence reports became increasingly bizarre. Humans weren't responding like any species the Korun had ever encountered. They weren't just fighting. They were transforming. Communication intercepts showed something unprecedented. Discussions about alien invasion were happening everywhere, in university laboratories, community centers, online forums, rural villages. Every human was not just a potential defender, but a potential innovator. The United Earth Protocol wasn't just a defensive strategy. It was a blueprint for a new kind of civilization. Humanity had been given an ultimatum by the Korun. They were choosing to write their own story. The first human strike against the Korun home systems was nothing like a traditional military operation. Captain Maria Chen stood on the bridge of the U.S. Defiant, a vessel that was less a spaceship and more a living, breathing technological organism. Around her, the crew moved with an almost telepathic coordination. They weren't just operating a spacecraft. They were collaborating with it. The captured and reverse-engineered Korun, faster-than-light drive, hummed with an energy that was part machine, part something entirely new. Hybrid technologies developed in the underground laboratories of Earth had transformed human space capabilities in ways no one could have predicted. Their target was the Korun's primary quantum communication hub, a massive network of interconnected stations that formed the central nervous system of the alien civilization. Approach vector calculated, the ship's integrated AI reported. But it wasn't a cold, mechanical voice. It was conversational, adaptive, almost playful. And hey, I've got a few tricks up my metaphorical sleeve. The attack plan was beautiful in its complexity and apparent randomness. Multiple strike teams would approach from different vectors, each using a combination of technologies that defied traditional military strategy. Some vessels used quantum camouflage developed by a team of Brazilian optical engineers. Others employed electromagnetic disruption techniques created by a collective of independent hackers from around the globe. The Korun defense systems were designed to predict and counter threats with mathematical precision. They had no framework for dealing with an attack that was fundamentally unpredictable. One strike team, led by a former video game designer, used adaptive algorithm techniques learned from competitive gaming to create attack patterns that were mathematically nonsensical yet strategically brilliant. Another team, composed of climate scientists and marine biologists, developed infiltration techniques inspired by deep-sea organism behaviors. "We're not just attacking," Dr. Elena Rodriguez explained during the mission briefing. "We're having a conversation with their entire technological ecosystem." The most critical component was a quantum communication matrix developed by a team that included nuclear physicists, Buddhist monks, jazz musicians, and quantum computing specialists. It was a technology that was part science, part art, part philosophy. As the U.S. Defiant approached the primary Korun communication hub, something extraordinary happened. Instead of a traditional assault, they began broadcasting a series of incredibly complex information packets. Each transmission was a multi-layered communication that was simultaneously a weapon, a message, and a form of technological poetry. Invasion Commander Vex Prime watched in growing incomprehension as human strike teams didn't just attack the Korun systems, they began to integrate with them. Portions of the communication hub started to change. Not through direct destruction, but through a form of technological conversation that rewrote fundamental communication protocols. The human teams weren't destroying the Korun infrastructure, they were transforming it. Captain Chen looked at her crew and smiled. "We're not conquering," she said. "We're expanding the definition of what's possible." The universe watched as humanity took its first true step into the cosmic stage, not as conquerors, but as something far more dangerous. A species capable of turning conflict into creation. The final battle wasn't fought in a single location. It was a simultaneous multidimensional conflict that spread across quantum communication networks, physical space, and something that existed between thought and reality. Invasion Commander Vex Prime's central command hub began to disintegrate in ways that defied conventional understanding of warfare, destruction, or even existence itself. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the heart of the human offensive, surrounded by a team that looked more like a gathering of global innovators than a traditional military command. Quantum physicists worked alongside neural network specialists. Linguists collaborated with aerospace engineers. Cultural anthropologists sat next to advanced weapons designers. "We're not just fighting," Elena muttered, her eyes reflecting multiple holographic displays. "We're negotiating the very nature of conflict." The human strategy was impossibly complex. Instead of a straightforward attack, they were essentially having a multi-dimensional conversation with the Koran's entire technological infrastructure. Each transmission was simultaneously a weapon, a communication, and a form of technological diplomacy. Strike teams didn't just attack Koran systems. They infiltrated, transformed, and ultimately reimagined them. In the quantum communication networks, human-developed algorithms began to spread like a sentient virus. But this wasn't destruction. It was more like a radical form of technological translation. The Koran's rigid, logic-based systems encountered something they had never experienced, a form of communication that was part science, part art, part pure unpredictability. Captain Maria Chen led the physical space assault from the U.S. Defiant. The ship was no longer just a vessel. It was a living, breathing technological organism that seemed to anticipate threats before they could even manifest. "We're not here to destroy," Chen transmitted across multiple communication spectrums. "We're here to demonstrate something fundamental about existence." The Koran defense systems began to fragment, not through direct assault, but through a process that was more akin to a complex philosophical argument than a military engagement. Human teams introduced variables that the alien computational matrices simply could not process. Entire Koran communication networks began to transform. Rigid, logical systems encountered human communication patterns that were simultaneously precise and wildly creative. Mathematical algorithms met artistic expression. Pure logic confronted emotional intelligence. Invasion Commander Vex Prime watched in growing incomprehension as their perfectly calculated civilization began to evolve. The human offensive wasn't about conquest. It was about expansion. About demonstrating a fundamental truth about existence that the Koran had never considered. That limitation is the source of creativity. That unpredictability is a form of strength. That conflict can be a conversation. Quantum communication networks flickered. Massive technological infrastructures that had existed for millennia began to reshape themselves. The Koran weren't being destroyed. They were being introduced to a new way of understanding reality. "We're not winning a war," Dr. Rodriguez said to her team. "We're opening a dialogue with the universe." As the final transmission went out, it contained something the Koran had never encountered in millions of years of galactic expansion. An invitation to understand, rather than to conquer. The universe watched, and something fundamental shifted. The first transmission from the transformed Koran arrived 7 months after the final confrontation. It wasn't a message of surrender. It wasn't an apology. It was an invitation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before the United Earth Council, her presentation hologram flickering with quantum-entangled data streams that seemed to dance between mathematical precision and artistic expression. Around her, representatives from every corner of the globe watched with a mixture of anticipation and wonder. "We didn't just survive," she explained. "We fundamentally altered the way intelligent life communicates across the universe." The transformation was total and profound. The invasion had been humanity's crucible, a moment that forged a new understanding of existence itself. Technologies developed during the conflict had revolutionized every aspect of human civilization. Energy systems that could adapt like living organisms, communication networks that blurred the line between technology and consciousness, medical technologies that could rebuild and reimagine the human body itself. Global infrastructure had been completely redesigned. Cities were no longer static structures but living, breathing ecosystems that could adapt to environmental and social changes in real time. Educational systems have been transformed into collaborative networks that treated learning as a dynamic, collective experience. The Koran's quantum communication technologies, when integrated with human creativity, had opened up possibilities that no single civilization could have imagined. Humanity had become something new, a species that didn't just use technology, but collaborated with it in a fundamental, almost symbiotic way. Captain Maria Chen, now leading the first interstellar diplomatic mission, discovered that the conflict had changed the Koran as profoundly as it had changed humans. Their rigid, logic-based civilization had encountered something they had never experienced, a form of intelligence that saw limitation as an opportunity, that transformed conflict into creation. "We're not just exploring space," Chen told her diverse crew. "We're in a constant dialogue with the universe itself." The first joint human-Koran research stations became something more than scientific outposts. They were living laboratories of possibility, where different forms of intelligence could meet, communicate, and create. Invasion Commander Vex Prime, now functioning more as a diplomatic liaison than a military leader, struggled to explain to other galactic civilizations what had happened. How a seemingly primitive species had not just repelled an invasion, but fundamentally transformed the nature of technological and cultural interaction. On Earth, children grew up learning languages that were part communication, part mathematics, part art. They understood technology not as a tool, but as a collaborative partner. Schools taught not just scientific principles, but the art of creative problem-solving, of seeing limitations as opportunities. The final report to the United Nations was simple and profound. We did not defeat an enemy. We expanded the definition of intelligence itself. Humanity had taken its first true step into the cosmos, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as something entirely new. A species capable of turning the most fundamental challenges into opportunities for growth, understanding, and creation. The universe watched and waited to see what would come next.